I'm going to tell you the story of a terrifying old creep that has stalked me since I was 16 years old. I'm currently 20. So basically, to set the scene, I'm an average height, average size 20-year-old female. I've been told I'm very approachable and perhaps too nice to strangers. I sometimes just don't have the heart to tell people to screw off. And I definitely should. Obviously, I'm not going to give specific details, but I worked in a restaurant which was inside a bigger shopping center. My stalker, an old man named Eric, worked for the actual shopping center itself, and not a store inside it like me. When I was 16 and first started the job, I was quite timid and awkward, and let anyone say pretty much anything to me. I didn't quite know what to say when older customers and other employees would make inappropriate comments to me. I would simply just laugh off whatever people would say or not respond. In my 16-year-old mind, this was a lot easier to handle. I had one other friend at my job who was my age, and her name was Jessica. Jessica had worked there for longer than I had, and one day she asked me if I'd heard of this guy who worked in the shopping center called Eric. Jessica described Eric as very strange. She didn't describe him as frightening or unsettling, or even someone to be afraid of, just as a very eccentric man, really. She and other employees would laugh at his odd sayings and awkward behavior. Jessica has also told me that Eric had brought her a present on Valentine's Day, some chocolate. Anyone would think this was a friendly behavior or harmless flirting if he wasn't a 50-something-year-old man bringing chocolates to a 16-year-old girl he barely knows. I began to see for myself that Eric wasn't just an innocent old man with a slight crush. He had other intentions. The first time I remember Eric approaching me was when I was filling up a machine near the entrance of my work. This machine was out of the view of all of the other employees, and the restaurant was empty, so this was pretty much the perfect time for a creep to approach without being seen. Eric wasn't supposed to enter my place of work when he was working at the shopping center, so he had deliberately gone out of his way to come and speak to me. To describe his appearance, he is your typical creepy old loner. He was gaunt, had gray hair with bald patches, and had beady little eyes which he never averted from yours. And I can't get them out of my head to this day. Eric must have snuck up on me as I looked up, and he was standing right next to me, a little too close. I could feel his breath on my cheek. "My name is Lucy." Eric asked me, "Lucy, are you married?" He almost giggled after he asked me this. He had a smirk on his face which made me feel as if he was trying to pretend that he thought I was older than I was, and at 16, I looked 16. Eric liked to ask me questions that he already knew the answer to, just to see what my reaction would be, letting me know in his own way that he had been looking up information about me on social media. He would do this frequently. I began to clock onto the fact that Eric had been going a little further than just approaching me at work, and instead stalking my social media accounts in the weeks following this first encounter, such as Twitter and Instagram, when he began asking me very specific questions about things I had posted about in the days before. For example, I had posted on Instagram about a tattoo I got, which was in homage to my favorite band. I was serving a customer one day only to be interrupted by a shrill but quiet voice. It was Eric. His eyes were huge and he had a look of pure excitement and menace on his face. He had yet again entered my workplace when he wasn't supposed to, just to talk to me. He asked me, "Lucy, what's your favorite insert band here song?" Eric relished in my discomfort. You could see by my reaction that I was clocking on to the fact that he had been viewing my personal social media, and the thought of that made my blood run cold. I felt disgusting and violated. The tattoo I had gotten was covered by my work uniform, so the only way he could have seen it was by going through my Instagram page. This creeped me out majorly, but somehow I just forced myself to forget all about it and carried on working. Over the course of a few months, Eric would come into my workplace more and more frequently, asking me bizarre questions and still reciting back to me things that I had tweeted about or posted on Instagram. Every time I would see him, I would get visibly uncomfortable, and he liked this. This is what he wanted. All while this was happening, Jessica approached me and let me know that Eric had followed her in his car on her walk home from work, slowing down to ask her where she lived. I had also been told other disturbing news about Eric from multiple different people. It seemed as if he was becoming more invested in whatever his intentions were towards me and Jessica. News had traveled to one of my managers about Eric's unsettling actions towards me, and this manager informed me that a few years ago, Eric was rumored to have followed a young girl who used to work for our restaurant into a toilet. Things didn't quite make sense to me. He was known for being a creep, yet still employed at the shopping center. On one hand, I was glad to know I wasn't just creeped out for no reason, but on the other hand, I was frightened as he'd been doing this for years, yet no one had stopped him. Anyways, there was a woman who worked at the same place as me called Rebecca, and she had some sort of disability which caused her to befriend and be trusting to people without knowing anything about them. It seems that Eric took advantage of her as he had asked for her phone number and she gave it to him. Rebecca had shown me her texts with Eric, and he had texted her things like, "Rebecca, are you alone?" or "Rebecca, are you sat on the bus alone?" But the most unsettling part of it all was the text from Eric that read, "Rebecca, could you please let me know any information on the girls that work with you?" I was stunned. This was quite slowly turning into my nightmare. I was constantly questioning why this old man was so hell-bent on finding out everything to do with my life. Why me? He had gone out of his way to source information about me through a vulnerable person I worked with, and I was scared that he was going to go further. Again, this creeped me out, but still, for some reason, I forgot about it and carried on with my life, which was very hectic at the time. And in a way, I'm grateful that I didn't have the time to dwell on Eric's growing obsession. However, this was something I wouldn't be able to ignore forever, as Eric began inserting himself into my life in ways I couldn't just ignore or brush off. One night, I was watching the movie Grease with my family, and I must have tweeted something stupid like, "Grease is my favorite film," because it's a great film, right? Anyways, the morning after my tweet, Eric approaches me in his usual way and utters, "Do you like the film Grease, Lucy?" The same usual smirk lit up his face and the same usual wave of disgust washed over me. He was really making it a point to let me know he was watching me. I tried to carry on with my day, but spent the entirety of my shift feeling a little shaken up. To someone reading this story, it may not seem as unsettling to you as it did to me at the time. But when someone is going out of their way to make sure you know that they know information about you, you spend every waking hour thinking about what they plan to do with this information and why they insist on taunting you with this knowledge. The very second I clocked out of work and got into my car, my phone went off. This was a notification for PayPal. I clicked on this notification to see that I had received £3 from an Eric Stanley, and the note attached to it read, "To Lucy, Grease is the word from Eric." He literally found my PayPal account and sent me £3 with a quote from the movie attached to it. If this wasn't crazy enough, in the days following, I received a string of anonymous calls, incessant calls, one after the other. I was in floods of tears and ended up having a huge panic attack. I felt like there was no escape. My phone rang and rang and rang all night. I had to turn it off to get away. Even when I turned my phone back on, the calls continued, and every time my phone would ring, my head felt like it was being impaled with the sharpest knife in the world. I was on a complete edge. The phone calls that I did answer were just someone breathing down the phone, making a point to breathe heavy. I even swear that they were trying to sound like they were jerking themselves off, which sickened me. I had no proof that this was Eric, but it wasn't hard to put two and two together after all the lengths he had gone to in order to track down my personal information. If he had found out my PayPal address, my phone number, and all of my social media accounts, what was stopping him from finding out where I live? Breaking in, hurting me or my family? That night I had horrific dreams in which he chased me around my house and taunted me for hours. I still have similar dreams and struggle to sleep without my boyfriend present, as I'm scared he's standing right outside my door to this day. I reported Eric to my managers and they passed my complaint on to the managers of the shopping center. At this point, I was genuinely scared for my safety. Multiple girls added to my statement and added details of times they had witnessed Eric's unsettling behavior, or times he had been inappropriate with them too. Eric had been cautioned by the shopping center's management, yet nothing was done, except the fact that he was warned not to talk to me. Eric found ways around the no talking to Lucy rule. He would make animal noises at me when he would see me, like a monkey or a dog or any bizarre noise that would get my attention. I think he just wanted me to think that he had outsmarted me and found a way around the rules. After this, I stopped working at the restaurant as a full-time job and saw Eric less and less, which was obviously great for me. I moved to cities as I went away for university and made new friends which distracted me from my old life in my hometown. I still thought about Eric every now and then, and when I focus on it for too long, I can't be alone, out of fear that he is still keeping tabs on me. The thought of that terrifies me. After moving away and starting my new life, I forgot all about the twisted little man who used to obsess over me at my old job. I forgot he existed, but I was soon going to remember. On Christmas Day, I was back home in my hometown with my parents. My phone buzzed, and I expected it to just be another message from a friend or a family member, but I was wrong. I received a notification from PayPal, and it was the exact amount of £3, only not from Eric this time, but from a girl whose name I didn't recognize at all. I opened up the PayPal app only to see a note attached to this payment I had received. The note read, "Sending on behalf of Eric." My blood ran cold, again. I had forgotten all about this man and all he had done to make me feel unsafe and unsettled, and here he was again, antagonizing me, at this time doing it through other people. Perhaps his way of telling me that him being banned from talking to me himself won't stop him from entering my world. I threw my phone down on the couch and spent the night drinking with family, until I forgot about the notification. I probably should have told someone about it, but I just wanted to do as much as I could to block him out. I didn't want him to control me anymore, and I since haven't seen or heard anything from him, and I want it to stay that way. I think Eric still works at the shopping center and lives local to me. I avoid my old workplace so I don't have to see him, and he doesn't have to see me. So to the creepy, beady-eyed freak that made me live in fear, let's not meet again. I've wanted to post or tell this story for years, and now I finally have a way to share it. This is going to be a long read, but it will tell you about the scariest experience of my life. I was 15 years old, living in a medium-sized city in North Florida. It had about 60,000 people, but some areas were really spread out and rural. Don't think of it like New York City or anything, More like a lot of houses spread out over a huge area and condensed shopping centers. I was a bit of a punk that my parents had a hard time controlling, so that meant I basically snuck out constantly and was always riding my bike around the city all hours of the night with my friends, fighting and constantly causing trouble. For reference, I was probably 5'10" and 150 pounds. My next door neighbors were my best friends, let's call them Nick and Tim. Nick was younger than us and probably 5'5" and 140 pounds, and Tim was 5'8" and easily 210 pounds. Nick and Tim were brothers, only a year or so apart. On that night, Tim had texted me around 1 a.m. asking me to ride bikes with him and his brother to his girlfriend's house so he can get lucky. I remember being hesitant because of how long the bike ride was. I just looked it up and it was 9.6 miles from my house to her street. But Tim begged and begged me to go until I agreed. Our city had a curfew, meaning any police in the area that saw you and assumed you were a minor would stop you and possibly issue you a ticket and bring you home. That meant we had to be careful about being seen by cars going by. While the bike ride to her house went by without any issues, we took our time, joked around, smoked a little pot, and genuinely just enjoyed the ride together. We ran out of what little pot we had on the way and finally got to his girlfriend's house after what felt like an hour. Tim snuck around the back to go in and Nick and I just sat on an electrical box and talked. Maybe 30 minutes went by and Tim triumphantly snuck out of the house, bragging about his time in there, and says we should head out. Annoyed at how long it took and nearly sober, we both agreed. The first mile of the ride went by smoothly, but things changed. We had just passed a decent-sized shopping center and a church. We rode by it slowly in zero rush at all. After we passed it, it led to a long stretch of road with woods and canals on each side. 2 lanes on each side separated by palm trees and landscaping in the middle. Sidewalks on both sides, and on the right side another road connects to the parkway. We were riding on the right-hand sidewalk. Off in the distance we saw a very tall older man wearing a yellow raincoat and a large backpack. He was walking back and forth on the sidewalk under a streetlight on the corner of the parkway and the side street. We all went silent as we got closer. I don't think he could have seen or heard us, as there were no lights over us and there were sprinklers going off in the median. I remember hearing him dragging his feet across the ground and mumbling. He was dragging his feet almost like he was trying to brush away the concrete to find something underneath it. The mumbling was incoherent and frantic. Honestly, it made my heart sink and my stomach knot up. I couldn't understand anything he was saying, and the only way to go to get home was to go by him. Nick said, "Yo, let's cross the street and get onto the other sidewalk." Tim and I agreed. I remember this so distinctly that we crossed the landscaped median, and a jet of sprinkler water hit me directly in the face and got into my mouth and my eyes. It smelled like sulfur and tasted horrible. On the other side, we could hear the mumbling and scraping of his feet clearer. I could now see more details about him. He was smoking a cigarette and was probably 6'5", had on a huge green backpack, was extremely skinny, had long gray hair, was wearing combat boots and blue ripped jeans, and he had a full white beard. He didn't seem to notice us until we were directly across from him. We all had our eyes locked in his direction when he suddenly stopped walking, talking and scraping his feet, looked up from the ground and let out this god-awful screech. It was like he tried to say 100 words at once. None of us knew what he tried to say. After the initial scream, I could make out, "What the F are you doing?" It startled us. We were now 25 yards away from him, and then he screams, "What the F are you looking at?" I was a foolish teenager, so I piped up to say something smart, and Tim riding next to me grabbed onto me and said, "Don't say a damn word." So I didn't, and in hindsight, I am so glad I didn't. He kept screaming in our direction and we kept riding. The further we rode, the fainter the screaming got. Then it stopped. We crossed the street again to the other side and made it about a mile down the road, all of us on edge. We glanced over our shoulders constantly to make sure he wasn't following us. We talked briefly about it and how strange it was, but we were glad it was over with. Or so we thought. Nick and Tim were riding in front of me when I thought I heard something behind me. I turned around and there he was, maybe an arm's length away, headed directly for me. The yellow raincoat hood was pulled up over his head and buttoned. This guy was standing up on his mountain bike, pedaling as hard as he could. We locked eyes and he started screaming. I mean really screaming. He screamed not words, not any language, just a constant scream as loud as he could. I have the chills writing this even now as a 25-year-old grown-ass man with a wife and a baby. If someone ever illustrated that image and I saw it, I would probably have a panic attack. I screamed, "He's right behind us," and stood up pedaling as hard as I could. I think we all did. And he was right behind us the whole time, screaming. Every so often he would get right on top of us, screaming and trying to knock us off of our bikes. I don't know how long we rode with him behind us, but it felt like eternity. I think age played a factor because he must have got tired and let us get ahead a bit. Exhausted, we pulled into a neighborhood and started cutting through yards trying to lose him. We jumped off our bikes and all just decided if he's still chasing us, we were going to make our stand together and fight. It was like a hive mind decision, all too tired to keep running, so it was our only option. We waited for him, but he never came. I don't even remember hearing him. I still can't recall when we lost him. I called my house phone, waking both of my parents up in the process, and told my dad about the situation. He told me to get home and figure it out. I asked to talk to my mother, and she yelled at me on the phone and refused to come pick us up, as I stood in the middle of the street hoping this crackhead didn't come and kill us all. I got home with Nick and Tim in tow, who asked if they could crash in my room. Of course I said yes. I think we all still have some weird feelings about that night, and we never really spoke of it again. I don't know what he wanted. He was clearly on drugs, but it makes me wonder if he would have robbed us, or worse,